Grotesque was once a prince that lived in the underground realm of Subterranea. He is also so hard to kill. His first big fight that we got to see was against the X-Men. Grotesque was the last living member of his kingdom. An earthquake caused by Dr. Hunt destroyed the underground civilization, and of course, one survivor remained, Grotesque. He rightfully guessed that the above world caused the earthquake and came up to avenge his people. He learned of the earthquake machine and decided to use that to destroy the above world. He confronts the X-Men and the X-Men defeat him because Professor X used his mental power to stop the machine. Frustrated, Grotesque slammed himself into the machine to get it to work again, but that actually caused it to explode. The X-Men thought that the explosion killed him and Professor X. They were wrong. Professor X wasn't actually there. It was actually Changeling that had been pretending to be Professor X under Professor X's command, and well, Grotesque just can't die, so he went on to fight Miss Marvel. She also hit him with something that should have killed him. He survived and fought the Avengers, and then later Thor. In the Thor brawl, there was again a large energy blast that should have killed him, but didn't. Not really. His body was gone, but his spirit remained. His loyal captive followers, the Lava Men, took that spirit and put it in an impenetrable armor, and he went on to fight the X-Men again, this time in San Francisco. Nightcrawler found the cheat code to defeat Spirit Armor Grotesque. He took off his helmet. His spirit was released from the suit and dissolved. With his track record though, I wouldn't be surprised if Grotesque appeared alive in a few years. Pretty Boy is more than just a punk pretty face. He has some pretty cool cybernetic implants that can expand to be 3 times their length. If you don't think he is pretty cool, he can just use his mind control powers to fix that. He gets access to a person's brain using these fiber optic filaments in his eyes. Then he kind of reprograms you. Pretty Boy is known for his affiliation with Donald Pierce. He was a member of the mercenary group Pierce created called the Reavers. While on this team, he passed away for the first time. Big moment in every Marvel character's journey, but like most Marvel heroes and villains, his death did not stick and he was soon back in action. The second passing happened under the leadership of Deathstroke and he was put 6 feet under by Logan, but again it didn't stick and the guy was back in action brawling against the X-Men. Eventually, by the end of the battle with the X-Men, he was arrested. The character debuted in 1988's Uncanny X-Men 229. A bonus story in Marvel Tales Volume 2, issue 262, featured the X-Men sparring against a pretty interesting group. They were known as the Desert Dwellers. Their leader was Sunstroke. He claimed he was created when a man's sense of strategy was melded with the power of the Daystar. I'm assuming the Daystar is the sun. Combining with the sun in this case gave Sunstroke the ability to create and absorb light and heat. The creation of the heat also allows the guy to fly. Sunstroke, like the X-Men, fights with a team, the Desert Dwellers. We'll actually get more into one member in a later video, but for now, there are 3 other things on the team. I say things, not people, because they were a cactus, stone, and lizard made into humanoid villain versions of themselves, Squadcles. The Desert Dwellers fought the X-Men when the X-Men were traveling through the desert. The Desert Dwellers attack the X-Men, but they don't actually care that they attack the X-Men flying plane, they just have been taking down flights for supplies. It's in this fight we learn that Sunstroke needs the sun to activate his powers, so Storm creating clouds made him almost fall from the sky. Honestly, the Desert Dwellers are doing a pretty good job. Wolverine gets chucked into a mountain at one point, but the day is saved when Banshee shows up, screams, and the Desert Dwellers can't handle it, so they retreat. Collective Man is just so interesting to me. The villain is actually 5 people merged into one, specifically 5 brothers from China. When they merge together, they apparently gain a connection to everyone in China. You heard that right. Everybody. The connection allows Collective Man, as the brother mashup is called, to draw on power from any Chinese person they want. Drawing on 10,000 people one time gave the Collective Man enough strength to handle Sasquatch. It's not all sunshine and rainbows though. The brothers almost died from absorbing too many people's life forces at one time. I think that's karma right there. The brothers also have another very odd ability. They can make any Chinese person a clone of a brother and then merge with them. They have a hive mind, meaning they can mentally speak to just each other, but if they want to speak the old-fashioned way but are a few miles away from each other, they can just teleport to wherever their brother happens to be. It turns out you may need to prepare for trouble, make it double, as there are no rules when it comes to combining. You don't have to be like 5 brothers in one, you can go 2 brothers together, 3 brothers together, 4, 1, it doesn't matter. You can get different size of the villain persona. The brothers fought the X-Men when the X-Men were in town to look into Zorn. The 5 made it very hard to do so as they created an army of themselves to attack the X-Men. I just can't believe the brothers merged together and are able to then call on the power of all of China. Okay, so in the Marvel Universe, there is Man-Ape, that is M'Baku, but this ain't about him, even though he is more popular. We are looking at Ape-Man, and also briefly touching on the concept of the Annie-Men. So Ape-Man was a human, Gordon Kiefer, that dressed in an ape suit. He had a pretty iconic start to his career. He tried to rob Stark Industries, obviously failed, and went to jail. But his ape thing worked in his favor. Criminal mastermind, the organizer, was starting something called the Annie-Men, a team made up of other animal or insect-themed villains. Ape-Man was a natural fit for the squad, and so Cat-Man, also a team member, broke him out of jail. There have been many Annie-Men, but the team that started it off and surrounded Ape-Man was him, Catman, Frogman, and Birdman. They fought against the X-Men in X-Men 94. The Annie-Men showed up to take over a military base, and the X-Men said, nope. It's in this comic that it's shown that Count Nefaria did some experimentation on the Annie-Men to make them more like their animal counterparts and significantly less human. Ape-Man becomes way stronger than he used to be. The fight with the X-Men doesn't go well for the heroes at first. The reason? They're too tired. The X-Men get it together though, and in the process, Ape-Man gets to experience Storm's power firsthand. The X-Men do come out on top, which really isn't shocking in the slightest. Ape-Man does meet his end eventually due to an explosion. Bloody Bess, she is a queen, she is mother, she deserves attention. She is a pirate, and currently little is known about her past. Her present is a different story. The woman is a pirate. She is part of the Crimson Pirates. The Crimson Pirates and the X-Men first went mutant abilities to sword when the pirates were temporary allies with Goth, a shifty guy involved with unethical trading. The allies assisted with releasing someone that really should have stayed in X-Men custody. The X-Men ended up fighting the allies, and of course Bloody Bess and the X-Men were winning, but there was some possession involved and the X-Men were captured. Bloody Bess was in charge of keeping that section of the team in check. The team was taken to this market, and then things went south from there for the pirates. Goth was no more by the end of the battle, and Bess, along with the other pirates, fled. The Crimson Pirates stuck together and worked as kind of like mercs for hire. Bloody Bess, as a pirate, is very, very good at sword fighting, but she also has telepathic powers. She once tried to use the powers to connect with Omega Black for an assignment, but instead let the Shadow King loose. The king possessed her fellow pirates and they attacked her. She called to Nightcrawler for help. They had a little thing going on. He arrived, the X-Men arrived, the X-Men also then got possessed, and Nightcrawler and Bess had to fight together to save the day. Last we know of Bloody Bess, she has dedicated her days to finding her old pirate friends. All in all, a very cool character on a cool team, and yet she has less than 10 appearances. She debuted in the year 2000, and her last appearance was in 2015, so hopefully she gets picked back up soon. Back when Hank McCoy, Beast, was being recruited by Professor X to join the X-Men, there was another guy who wanted to get Beast on his side. His name was Orlando Furio, and he wanted to conquer the world. He wanted Hank on his side so bad, he kidnapped him and his parents. He used Hank's parents as leverage to get Hank to steal a mini energy reactor. The reactor was used to power a machine that was designed to create global disasters. The good news is the X-Men eventually arrived and made sure the machine would never even once be used, and they freed Hank and his parents. The machine exploded, and the guy, Conquistador, was caught in the destruction and presumably also exploded. He really committed to the bit though, the Conquistador. He carries around a sword designed to look like what the actual Conquistadors would have had. It splits into a 3-pronged stun weapon that really hurts if its blast is directed at you. Not only does he dress like a Conquistador, but he managed to find a bunch of other people that were also willing to dress like Conquistadors to be his henchmen. He operates out of a building that was either from that time or built in that fashion. No one is doing it like him anymore. Bring back villains that had a theme and stuck to it like it was on sale at Party City. Honestly, I don't want to see any more villains that just wear all black and have pointy faces. I want camp, I want drama, and I want people to have a brand. So this next guy, his name is Thug, and that's what he is. He looks like a robot cowboy that has seen better days. Thug made a name for himself in the comics as part of Loeb's team. Loeb was very interested in the science behind humans turning into mutants even though they were born with no X gene. Thug assisted in Scalp Hunter's capture and along the way fought various X-Men. He came head to head with the X-Men again later during the Experience Substance promotional gala. Thug is not a mutant, he is a human cyborg. He had been working close to John Sublime and received cybernetic enhancements from him. Their purpose was to mimic mutant powers. They made him very hard to hurt. He was resistant to most attacks pain-wise, but you can clearly hurt the guy if the array of scars on him are anything to go off of. Probably the most interesting thing to me that would be just so useful when in a fight is the fact that Loeb was able to down download info about the X-Men, who they are, and how they fight into his brain. He downloaded that into Thug, so Thug had a better chance at fighting them. Very cool. This Thug debuted in Uncanny X-Men 515 in 2009, but there are other Thug characters. They are green, and they have no correlation to 616 Thug. The villain LT Grey debuted in X-Men 25 in 1966. His human name is Juan Moroz, and he was a treasure hunter. Specifically, he focused on treasures from the ancient world. He is a menace. That is literally what he is described as on the cover of his debut comic. In that comic, he finds an amulet that belonged to the Mayan sky god. It gives him an array of powers like telepathy, telekinesis, and something called precognition, knowing if danger is coming or near. LT Grey with all these powers only exists when he has part of the sky god's amulet. When both pieces are put together, he just turns into the sky god. X-Men issue 25 explains this whole journey. In issue 26, we see a fight between the X-Men and LT Grey, with the X-Men trying to get the amulet off. They do, of course, succeed, and LT Grey is back to himself again and arrested. He later reappears to fight off against Khazar in issues 3, 4, and 5 of volume 2, but issue 5 is where LT Grey has met his match in the form of the Mystic Mist. The mist causes him to evolve to the state of death, and he falls off a cliff. We do see a very old, very still body, so I think it's safe to say LT Grey is permanently resting. But you never know. The Neo race is made of super mutants, and we are looking at super mutant Salvo. He was part of the Neo war clan that brawled with the X-Men. It happened toward the beginning of the war between humans and mutants. The war kicked off when all the mutant powers were removed by the High Evolutionary, but you probably know that already. He survived the scrap with the X-Men. He didn't survive Magneto. He tried to attack him. He was torn apart. Why did Salvo attack the Master of Magnetism, one of the most powerful mutants? I don't know. If I were made of solid metal, which is what Salvo is made of, I simply would not have done that. I have a lot of questions about this guy. One thing about Salvo is the metal. He can turn into like guns on his arms, and he draws the ammo from his body. But if he does that, would he eventually disappear? I have to wonder, because I imagine the only thing he has to draw from himself is himself. Is he just shooting pieces of himself? And would said ammo stay as metal forever, or would you be left with toes on the ground? I feel like these are valid questions, but would this mean he has a very powerful healing factor if he were to regenerate every atom he's lost in a fight? Lots of questions for a character that I will probably never see again.
White Rabbit is Lorena Dodson, and while she might kinda seem like a joke villain, we've seen some pretty dark storylines featuring her in the past few years. White Rabbit is often out to prove that she's one of the baddest bads around and earn acclaim and recognition for her misdeeds. In the Absolute Carnage one-shot, Symbiote Spider-Man, we get to see White Rabbit featured in a much darker tale, when she runs into a judge who at one point came into contact with the Venom symbiote. In the flashback, we find out she ends up getting on his bad side, and in order to get back at him for what she believes was an unfair trial, she comes after him and his son, confronting them with a gun. It turns out the weapon is a joke gun, which actually shoots out just a little flag that says bang, but the shock of the whole event actually triggers a heart attack in the judge's son, Dan, who dies as a result. White Rabbit is arrested, but escapes out of her trial, being busted out by a large mech-like rabbit, very White Rabbit style. She torments the judge as she leaves, who attempts to break into the courtroom to kill her, but accidentally shoots an innocent court stenographer instead. Lorena might have shown remorse here, but instead she actually felt absolved of guilt by the judge's act, showing just how twisted and cold she can be, something that we don't always see a side of her, and I honestly feel like she can be pretty scary at times because of that. These are the kinds of stories I would love to see more of with White Rabbit. What do you think of White Rabbit? Would you like to see more just like intense stories with villains? I feel like we just sometimes don't get enough of those. I mean, sometimes we get too many. Once again, Joker, I'm looking at you. Amazo is no ordinary android. He possesses technology that allows him to replicate the abilities and powers of the superheroes that he battles. This gives him a significant advantage in combat, making him an opponent to be reckoned with, and that's not all. Amazo can even duplicate his opponent's weapons, making him an even more challenging adversary. This is a villain who can take on not just the powers of the Justice League, but who can also grapple, lasso, and fly majestically with a cape, I imagine, if he so chooses, with the best of them. The Flash, Aquaman, Martian Manhunter, Wonder Woman, and Green Lantern make up the roster that Amazo initially faced, and as such, these are usually the power sets that he possesses by default. But in general, Amazo is pretty amazing. Yeah, they don't do a lot. with him, I feel like. This next one is honestly just so ridiculous. We're talking about Swarm, a ridiculous villain, but that doesn't mean that I of course don't want more of him in the comics. After all, he is ridiculous, and if you know me, if you've watched any videos that I have hosted, you know that I love ridiculous. Who is Swarm? He's a German World War II scientist who is made up of bees. Killer bees. He escaped after the war and had enough loot in his possession to basically fund his research on killer bees. What he likes to do, mad science stuff. That research led him to becoming devoured by a swarm of initially passive bees who were turned monstrous and then became basically uncontrollable. Trying to control them, and it backfired. However, his consciousness ended up merging with the bees as he was devoured, allowing him to basically live on in the swarm, which he often manipulates into a humanoid shape. Also, I gotta say, I was so excited when I was playing Marvel Strike Force when I got Swarm in my game. We're not sponsored, but I wish we were. Marvel Strike Force, hit us up, come on. This next villain is very obscure. We're talking about Baron Bug. Yeah, we got another bug villain for you if you like bug villains. I know I do. Baron Bug and his insect army. He first appeared in House of Mystery issue number 163 back in the 1960s. Here he was introduced as the wildest villain yet on the cover, and ended up going up against hero Robbie Reed, the original owner of the H-Dial for those that didn't know. Despite the claim that he was the wildest villain, this wasn't enough to keep Baron Bug going in terms of his momentum, and he quickly fell into obscurity. He did resurface many years later in the 2000s in the 52 series and Doom Patrol, but still most people don't even know who he is, never mind the fact that he was once labeled as the wildest villain in all of DC Comics. A bold claim indeed. One of my favorite new villains from Spider-Man, this one actually comes to us from a not as well known Spider-Man title, or at least I don't think as many people know about it, Spine-Tingling Spider-Man. Now we're not talking about the physical comic series, which also is really great, but instead the digital only Infinity comic. If you aren't familiar with the Infinity comics, they are nice, light, short reads that are laid out more like kind of like a webtoon where you like scroll down vertically through them to the end. I personally love this format, it's so cool, and there is just so much alternate and interesting stuff that creatives can do with storytelling in this format. The Infinity comics are also only available through Marvel Unlimited, so if you want to check them out, get Marvel Unlimited and you can check them all out. Honestly, Marvel Unlimited is also great. Once again, not sponsored, but I wish we were, we should be, Marvel. In the Infinity comic by Saladin Ahmed, the villain in this story haunts Spider-Man with nightmares, keeping him awake and exhausted. Honestly, my biggest fear, I constantly feel like I'm overworking myself and I do not get enough sleep due to having some mild insomnia, I'd say, and I have a fear of dying from exhaustion as a result. Although, I hope I'm a long way away from that and I'm not that exhausted. In the end, we learn that this villain is known simply as the Sleep Stealer. Honestly, like I said, so scary. And they also have a haunting song, which you can find on Marvel's website that accompanies them as well, being played throughout the comic. I think it's also on YouTube too. Yeah, you should listen to it. It's creepy. Woo. From super creepy to super goofy, Calendar Man to most people is just a guy who is obsessed with the date. What a ridiculous villain. But in reality, he's also one of the most accomplished villains. During his first appearance, he almost managed to defeat Batman, one of the greatest and smartest detectives in the entire world, by giving him an almost unsolvable problem. That's right, he almost stumped Batman. Calendar Man sent an anonymous letter promising to commit 5 crimes, one each day, each one corresponding to a particular season in theme, with the 5th day also being a clue as to the true identity of Calendar Man with the 5th season. What is the 5th season? Batman failed to capture Calendar Man on the first 4 days, often arriving late to the scene of the crime. On the 5th day, it was only an ad for Calendar Man's side hustle as a magician, as he was playing for a suspicious amount of time coinciding with the crimes, 5 days at the Bijou Theater in Gotham, that allowed Batman to connect the dots. Where would Batman be without ads from the local newspaper? Where would any of us be without the local newspaper? Even Batman knows that local news is important. Also, I didn't say what the 5th season was, but you can guess what it is in the comments, and we'll also see how many of you are probably familiar with that story, because I know I couldn't figure it out. When I got to that reveal, I was like, really? Oh, okay. Mr. Smile and Mr. Sulk both have too cool a design to not do more things in the comics. They make their first appearance back in Doctor Strange issue number 5 back in 2020, and only recently made another new appearance in Vengeance of the Moon Knight earlier this year in 2024, reminding me of how much I love them and think they deserve just more appearances. Hopefully, we won't have to wait another few years before we get another appearance of these two. You might think you know Polka-Dot Man, but do you really know him? If you've seen James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, you are familiar with a version of Abner Krill, but the original Polka-Dot Man, also Abner Krill, of the New Earth continuity, was a bit different when it came to his power set. Initially, when Polka-Dot Man or Mr. Polka-Dot first appeared, he came armed with multiple different weapons, which actually all came from the polka dots on his suit. He could basically pull them off his suit and then turn them into any means of different weapons and devices. Super cool. Even once turning one into a getaway vehicle. Yeah, an entire vehicle from one polka dot. This is the version of Polka-Dot Man I'd be interested in seeing getting more love, especially if we got like a live action version of this version of Polka-Dot Man, although I did enjoy the version that they included in the Suicide Squad, so you know, that was good too, but the polka dots were a little different. What's better than leaping somewhat high? Walking on stilts. That's the premise behind this strange Marvel supervillain. Wilbur Day is a scientist who began his life of crime after stealing a coworker's design and using it to build a pair of armored stilt legs. Granted, his entire body is covered in metallic armor as well, and it is pretty strong. He even smashed She-Hulk down through the street and into a subway tunnel one time during a fight. Pretty impressive. But tragically, being taller than other heroes does not mean you're automatically better than them in a fight. There's of course that whole knock the legs out from under them strategy, and of course his armor also apparently has weak spots which have been exposed in the comics before to just easily take him down. They're like, oh, a weak point, poke. He's done. Iron Man at one point even fought armor with armor by throwing one of Stilt-Man's legs right back in his face after he detached them to jettison away and knock Stilt-Man out as a result. Poor Stilt-Man, he just can't catch a break. And finally, our last, but certainly not our least villain, definitely our most villain, Silver Swan, has such a cool design that when I first saw her in modern day comics, I thought she was actually a new character. But it turns out no. She is a classic Wonder Woman villain. The fact that I didn't know this made me think that she just hasn't gotten enough love throughout her history. So I'm here to help remedy that fact by including her on this list and telling you about her in case you didn't know either. There have been a few different versions of Silver Swan over the years, but she is at her core originally an 80s character, making her first appearance in Wonder Woman issue number 288 back in 1981. In the modern day, she is Vanessa Capitelis, and her powers allow her to manipulate tiny nanite robots in her bloodstream. Move over, Bloodshot! Initially, the character was known for her flight abilities and sonic scream, and for those that love the classic version, do not worry, she still has both those powers in the modern day as well.
The West Coast Avengers get all the weird villains. Cactus is a great example. He is a cactus and he's funny. Literally the first time he's seen in West Coast Avengers 17, Wonder Man laughs at him because he's a cactus. Cactus was created by the Dominius computer from a desert cactus. The computer gave the cactus human-like mobility and intelligence. This cactus is the original, but there are hundreds of duplicates out there apparently. Cactus's powers are shooting his cactus needles at a destructive speed and regenerating quickly, as he is technically a super powered plant. There were two other villains created from desert elements alongside Cactus. They were Butt, made of rock, and Gilla, made from the venomous lizard called the Gilla Monster. A super cactus, while funny and cool, didn't stand much of a chance against the West Coast Avengers and was defeated, but maybe we'll see a clone of him somewhere soon. Live action Two Gun Kid or Rawhide Kid can fight it. The leader of the group of desert misfits Cactus was in was Sunstroke. He was a human, however we don't really know how he got his powers. The villain just says he created himself, whatever that means. All he says to explain is that a man's sense of strategy was melded with the power of the Day Star. Merging with this power made him capable of absorbing light and heat. He can also generate light and heat to attack with. He did threaten to melt the armor off Iron Man's back. He fought the Avengers in the desert that day and disappeared shortly after that battle was ultimately lost. He resurfaced to attend a weapons expo and briefly fought Captain America. He went on to fight the X-Men. Later he joined the Masters of Evil, but was arrested after the team unsuccessfully took on the Thunderbolts. Echidna is literally mother. She is the mother of monsters both in Greek mythology and Marvel mythology. She has fought the Avengers Standard a few times and was affiliated with the Defenders of the Deep. She helped King Namor keep humans out of the water when the king declared the oceans off limits to everything that wasn't native to it. Echidna was also part of the Doom 2 maidens. During her time there, she attempted to recruit the Amazons, but ended up fighting the Amazons and losing. Most of her scraps with the Avengers happened while she was on the Defenders of the Deep. Eventually, she fought Ghost Rider and was neutralized by him. Icon among men, literally, his name is Icon. Icon appeared in 2 issues, Excalibur 59 and 60. He was a Wakandan biochemist who experimented on himself with the advanced tech Wakanda had to offer. The experiments resulted in him gaining the ability to turn himself and others into wood. With his new power, he set his eyes on the Wakandan throne. He had the idea in his head that Black Panther did not respect him as a scientist. Not true, by the way. One night during a Wakandan celebration, Icon shows up and starts turning people to wood. Luckily, the Avengers are in attendance, something Icon did not plan for. He does have an ace up his sleeve though. When someone is turned to wood, they are then under Icon's control. Black Panther wouldn't let the Avengers attack the wooden army as they are still technically his subjects. But worry not, out of literally nowhere comes this guy called Jungle Man to distract Icon. Jungle Man gives the Avengers their moment to start the fight, but Icon surrenders very quickly. The reason is because his whole plan rested on taking the throne quickly through fear, because the turning to wood thing only lasts an hour. The change back makes him pass out and he's carried away by Black Panther. Grotesque is hard to kill, for real. He first fought against the X-Men and was the guy that everyone thought eliminated Professor X, but he didn't because it was Changeling, but the energy blast Grotesque took then didn't kill him, and he went on to become a menace to Miss Marvel next. She also hit him with something that should have ended him. He again survived and fought the Avengers. In this particular battle, he was part of a group of subterranean beings that were initially fleeing their home underground because it was being attacked by deviants. Grotesque was a villain at heart though, and later, after that battle, kidnapped Thor's human host, Donald Blake, holding him hostage while Grotesque's lava men brought the living rock to the surface. The idea was that the living rock would then blow up a lot of the surface world. Thor made sure that didn't happen and broke the rock before it could come up. All the energy from the rock supposedly destroyed Grotesque. But he lived. He really is that one Emma Roberts surprise but you thought you'd seen the last of me meme. Turns out the energy just destroyed his body, not his spirit, so that was still floating around. The lava men took that spirit and put it in impenetrable armor, and he went on to fight the X-Men again. Nightcrawler found the cheat code to defeat Spirit Armor Grotesque. He took off his helmet. That's it. That caused the spirit to dissipate. Is this the end for Grotesque? Who knows? He has come back so many times, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him again soon. Making a deal with the devil is a common occurrence in the Marvel Universe. Actor Jason Rowland joined the trend in Tower of Shadows 5 when he made a deal with a demon, acting success in exchange for his soul. The demon was revealed to be Satanish, created by Dormammu and one of the most powerful demons seen by Earth. Jason's side effect of the deal was he looked like a monster, so he stayed out of the spotlight for a few years. He also, in that time, took on the villain name Hangman. Eventually, he met the mercenary group Night Shift and took over the team for Satanish. Hangman convinced the team to give up their souls to him so he could have more fame and power. The only thing was in the middle of all of this, his group caught the attention of the West Coast Avengers. The West Coast Avengers and Night Shift, while initially at odds, joined forces once the Night Shift realized their souls were in jeopardy. When the two teams defeated Hangman and his master, Hangman left to join another team of villains, the Lethal Legion. The Legion belonged to Satanish, and they again fought the West Coast Avengers and lost. The name Hangman didn't come out of nowhere. He carries around an enchanted rope. The rope can be as long as he wants it to be, and you can't cut it unless he wants you to. Literally, by force of will, Hangman can make the rope uncuttable. The rope is like an extension of Hangman as it responds telepathically to him. But if you hurt the rope, you won't hurt him. Necrodamus was born all shriveled up, his body was incredibly weak. The natural fix here is to turn to dark magic, that's the only thing you can do. Necro discovered that he can gain strength and even a godlike form if he steals the lives of innocent people. Classic move. The first time he tried it, he was defeated by the Defenders. The second time he tried it, he was stopped by the Avengers, specifically Scarlet Witch. She sent his soul straight to Limbo. Eventually, he did make it out of Limbo and fought the Fantastic Four, and then was sent back to limbo. Eventually, the shriveled man was taken care of by Agatha Harkness when she created zombies to attack him. He did have quite the run though. Agatha, Fantastic Four, Defenders, and of course the Avengers. Even though Necro's physical body was weak, he still had some magical powers like flight, teleportation, energy bolts, and shields. There are actually 3 Marvel characters that have taken on the name Chlorine, and none of them are popular. Marvel keeps trying and it has yet to work. I think they are all villains too. For sure the Chlorine I'm talking about right now is a villain. The actual name of this maybe person was never revealed, but his body is made of chlorine, so he is Chlorine. I don't think this villain is human. He refers to humans as humans, and usually if you are a human you wouldn't make a point to do that. This particular version of the character has only been seen once in Avengers Volume 1 issue 188. In that single issue we meet the whole team of elements actually. There's 4 of them: chlorine, carbon, phosphorus, vanadium, and radium. They are referred to as the elementals, but they are not affiliated with the ones in Spider-Man Far From Home at all. The elementals catch the attention of the Avengers because they are messing with a nuclear reactor. They might have been humans that forgot they were humans. It's complicated. What we do know is that they take humans to this pod connected to the nuclear reactor to rearrange their atoms to make them the desired element. So maybe that's where they all came from. They are trying to create 100 more element people. That is their goal. My guess is they want the whole periodic table. They fail, and the Avengers eventually defeat them. Chlorine did make the team retreat at first though. Since his entire body is chlorine, he can release large quantities of chlorine gas, and that's very poisonous. He doesn't seem to have any other powers past that though. The Avengers defeat the elementals by blowing up the reactor. The mixture of nuclear plasma and their charged atoms breaks down their atomic structures, which is their bodies. So it's presumed that they all, including Chlorine, are done for. But according to the conservation of mass, nothing can be created or destroyed though. It's possible that if the character were to pick up steam, someone could just do some weird experiment and put all the atoms back together and we'd have Chlorine again. This guy was primarily a villain to Thor, but did scrap with the Avengers too. Jared Carstairs was a skilled inventor and weatherman. Jared was not a good person. He stalked a girl to the point of getting fired from being the local weatherman. He couldn't handle not having the weather in his life, so he became Weather Maker. He created a suit that could create weather, not just sunny days, but also rain and tornadoes and lightning and hail. He, a force to be reckoned with. He ended up kidnapping the person he stalked, and that's when the Avengers stepped in. Weather Maker did a decent job of holding off the Avengers until Thor came back and destroyed the suit's power pack. Without it, the Weather Maker was just a guy. He was arrested, but the clever guy hid some weather circuitry in a hollow tooth and used that to escape jail. His escape effort channeled the Godstorm, which had been imprisoned by Thor, and the Godstorm hoped that this weather-crazed man would be his vessel of vengeance against Thor. So the Weather Maker got actual powers from this Godstorm and became Torrent. He ransacked New York City until Thor returned to take him back to Asgard. The guy used so much power, he pretty much exhausted himself. This made it easy for Thor to bring Torrent to Odin and get depowered and sent back to Earth. All of this happened in the Thor Godstorm series from 2001. You know how some people believe that every celebrity is secretly a member of some like demonic group or something? Well, Marvel actually did explore that once. This villain's name is Defiler, and he fought the West Coast Avengers. The Defiler is a demon. His particular brand of demon does not reside in our dimension, but does need the life force of others to survive and maintain his powers and his dimension. So he decided to come and kidnap people on Earth. But he did it with style. He arrived to Earth as a rock star. His band was called Corruption of Innocence. Iconic all around, no notes here. It's such a clever idea because people love celebrities, they will follow them anywhere, so it really wasn't hard for the guy to get people to literally follow him anywhere. And when he finished them off, there were hundreds of other people willing to take their place. The Defiler took everything up a notch at one of their concerts and started kidnapping the entire crowd. That's not even the wildest part of this issue. The whole thing is bonkers. To save all the people that had been transported through the portal to the demon dimension, Hank Pym and Mockingbird go to the dimension with a big rope tied around Pym. There are at least 100 people to save though, and all their life forces have been depleted, so they're all too weak to walk out. The solution? Hank Pym takes a fingerboard, those little tiny skateboards, and turns it into a huge skateboard so so everyone can ride it out. The Defiler ultimately does get defeated when he is thrown back into his world. It's presumed that he is gone forever and died alongside his world. The world has nothing on it to feed anymore, so it is presumably gone. If you want to check out all the wacky antics, the comic is West Coast Avengers Volume 2, Issue 38.
The story of Martin Lee, Mr. Negative, is actually quite interesting. The man who would become Mr. Negative was a member of the Snakeheads in China. He smuggled immigrants into the United States as a crew member of the Golden Mountain ship, but when the ship crashed onto the New York City shores, he stole the identity of one of the deceased immigrants named Martin Lee, but was unfortunately captured by the Maggia crime family and delivered to the chemist Simon Marshall, who was developing a new synthetic substance called D-Light, and was testing it on runaway teens and illegal immigrants. Thanks to D-Light and his unique biology, Martin Lee survived and developed superpowers related to the Dark Force and the Light Force, and he became Mr. Negative, dedicating himself to becoming Chinatown's kingpin of crime. He can take control of other minds and empower others and objects with Dark Force energy. He has the strength to send Spider-Man flying through 2 whole buildings. He can tank blows from Spider-Man and Anti-Venom, and is fast enough to dodge bullets. Whisper Adair is a villain that I actually had never heard of before. She's been around since 2000, and as a street level villain, mainly to Batman, but to other heroes as well from time to time, she's actually quite unique. Originally having ties to the League of Shadows, Whisper was given a serum by Ra's al Ghul that not only made her immortal, but gave her the terrifying ability to turn into a literal snake lady that can spit acid. If that weren't enough though, she even gained minor mind control abilities, and the serum even gave her the power to create a small group of men who also have the ability to shapeshift into different animals. While she is tied to both the League of Shadows and Intergang, her loyalty is mainly to herself, and she has become infamous in the Gotham underworld. Steel Serpent is basically the nemesis of Iron Fist, and he is quite the capable chappie. Davos is the son of the Thunderer, aka Lai Kung, and growing up, there was a lot of pressure on him to become the next Iron Fist. Davos took his shot at trying to defeat the dragon Shao Lao in order to gain the power of the Iron Fist, but he ultimately lost and was defeated. The fight itself was not sanctioned, and for that, he was banished from Kunlun and swore to wrest the power of the Iron Fist from whoever would succeed in the task. That was Danny Rand. As the Steel Serpent, he actually managed to fulfill that goal when he beat Danny in combat and took the power of the Iron Fist for himself, that is, until his own defeat. Davos's powers were then restored by the Crane Mother in exchange for becoming the champion of the mystical land of Kun-Zi. Every time I have to talk about the Batman villain known as Cornelius Stirk, I get a whole lot of heebie-jeebies. Stirk suffers from delusions which make him believe that he requires the nutrients of a human heart in order to stay alive. But not just any heart. Specifically, Cornelius believes that the heart is the most nutritious when it is full of norepinephrine, a natural hormone that secretes when a person is terrified, as well as adrenaline. So he uses his unexplained psionic abilities to mentally make people perceive him as someone else, which, other than allowing him to break out of Arkham Asylum the first time, also allows him to get close to his victims and then completely terrify them in the most insane ways possible before he quickly ends their lives and partakes in a nice old hearty meal. Cornelius is incredibly effective, and he's been able to both evade Batman and even make the Dark Knight go unconscious. Carlos La Muerto, a crime lord in South America and parts of Europe, first ever appeared as the villain Black Tarantula in Amazing Spider-Man number 419, and not too long after that, he gave Spider-Man one of the most absolutely brutal beatdowns I have ever seen the wall crawler suffer. The title of Black Tarantula is a legacy title that is handed down generation to generation, with the heir to the title being taken from an early age to begin a life of intense training. Now, I personally couldn't find how Carlos gained superhuman abilities, but he certainly has them, and used them when he beat up Spider-Man. The Black Tarantula has superhuman agility and strength, able to optimally press over 30 tons. He can exert himself at peak for 24 hours, he's nearly bulletproof, his speed is faster than Spider-Man's, he has absurdly powerful eyesight, he has the ability to heal both himself and others from near fatal injuries, and if that all weren't enough, he even has optic blasts. He has acted in some heroic capacities from time to time, which the heroes need to thank their lucky stars for because he can steamroll a heck of a lot of people. DC's Deathstroke is one of a few villains on this list that really toes the line of being a mere street level villain. With physical abilities 10 times that of a normal human being and the ability to use 90% of his brain, Deathstroke is a guy that has proven himself more than enough times. He has fought multiple different members of the Justice League, and even when his natural abilities have not been enough, he has found numerous ways to power himself up enough to get the job done, even being able to fight on par with Superman. He has taken down the Atom, Impulse, Batman, Kid Flash, the Phantom Lady, Uncle Sam, and obviously the Teen Titans. During Identity Crisis, he nearly took down the entire Justice League, taking down each member with methods tailored to each of their strengths and weaknesses before they rallied. But even with all of that, being a mercenary first and foremost, Deathstroke started as and often finds himself working on a street level capacity more often than anything else. Okay, so if you know who the mutant known as Legion is, the one who has hundreds of different alternate personalities that all have different mutant powers, well, Mary Walker is sort of like that. Only for Mary, she has only a handful of alternate personalities, and they just allow her to access the powers that as just Mary, she can't access. Those powers include limited amounts of pyrokinesis, telekinesis to move small objects, grabbing her dropped weapons, or even turning objects into armor, and telepathy, usually used to manipulate others, cause distractions, or influence people to do things without thinking, like grabbing their weapons. Her Mary persona is actually a pretty timid and quiet person, but her other main persona is Typhoid, who is more adventurous, lustful, and violent. She later adopted a few other personas like Bloody Mary, who was sadistic and brutal, and pretty much hated all men, and Zero, who was a cold, calculated, and militaristic person. Of all the characters on this list, I think Poison Ivy is by far not only the most powerful, but also the one who has the least amount of business being just a street level villain. Dr. Pamela Isley was a brilliant botanist who knew everything there is to know about plant life. She managed to work her way up to a position researching plants at Wayne Enterprises, but was fired after suggesting using plant-based chemicals to develop brainwashing substances. As she was being escorted out by security, she spilled chemicals all over herself from her newest assignment and gained a connection to the Green, an elemental force that connects all plant life. As a Batman villain, Ivy's goals aren't as simple as robbing banks and running gangs. She fights for the environment, using her connection over all plant life to really cause big problems, as her control over plant life can reach a global scale, and she's even put the Man of Steel under her control using her powerful toxins. Poison Ivy is basically a god in Batman street level villain clothing. Brock Rumlow was a gang member and criminal in New York City from a young age. As an adult, he honed his criminal talents under the tutelage of Taskmaster and became a mercenary and assassin, eventually gaining the attention and approval of the Red Skull. Rumlow's physical abilities have been enhanced to the peak of human ability, rivaling Captain America himself. He is highly skilled in combat, and he at one point also gained the ability to fire energy blasts capable of vaporizing multiple dudes from his head thanks to the Terrigen Mists, but this was only temporary. A lot of his feats have been against Captain America, who he physically matches, but he has physically manhandled quite a lot of people and has taken the lives of many others with his bare hands. He has tanked some incredibly heavy hits and is often underappreciated for just how much damage he can both take out and dish out. Basically, if Captain America can do it, there's a good chance that Crossbones can do it too, which makes him pretty darn capable. And lastly, maybe more powerful than you think is a bit of a lie for this point, because when it comes to the Batman villain Bane, he is widely known to be wildly powerful, especially as he is the one infamous for breaking the bat. Other than breaking the bat, Bane is largely known for his incredible levels of strength, which is even impressive before he uses his venom, being much stronger than Batman himself. After being pumped full of venom though, he gains a low superhuman level of strength, becoming capable of lifting up to 3 tons, as well as becoming superhumanly durable, fast, and even gaining a level of superhuman healing. But his strength is only one half of the equation, because what some people forget is that Bane also has a genius level intellect without ever actually going to school. He is a polymath, expert tactician, escapologist, multilingual, and even has a photographic memory. You couple all of that with his martial skill, and it's easy to see why Bane has become one of the Dark Knight's most feared adversaries.
Ben Reilly's Spider-Man once fought a demonic train, a possessed Train. I love comic book writers because how did this idea even happen? I'm obsessed. The train does have a title. It is the 666 train, of course, all aboard the 666 train. Doctor Strange's death and death of Doctor Strange Spider-Man causes a lot of problems as it resulted in the magic used to keep certain magical threats captive loosening their hold, so all of these bad magical things started escaping. Not good. If you were wondering why Peter Parker wasn't handling this, it's because he was in a coma. Felicia, or Black Cat, was helping out because she didn't trust Ben that much to be a good Spider-Man, so lucky her. She also got to fight the demonic Polar Express. I think it's actually the New York City subway. The train is possessed, but it is also maybe like a portal to the underworld because there are dozens of demons coming out of it. The task was specifically to exorcise the 666 train. Ben and Black Cat succeeded by defeating all the demons coming out of it. I really hope this idea originated from someone missing their morning train one too many times. Okay, so this next villain antagonized a hero that I also can't believe exists and antagonized the villain right back. The Heckler was the hero. His powers are literally just be annoying. That's me. I don't know. I'm secretly the Heckler. The hero wasn't super popular, which means his villain's popularity is basically non-existent. They're also a little bit silly. Boss Glitter was the main antagonist of the first Heckler issue. Don't let the ridiculous name fool you. He is not a DIY king. He is a mob boss. A very dangerous mob boss with a little flair. I can't stress this enough. This villain looks ridiculous, but he is ruthless. He looks like a clown trying to impersonate Prince, but he controls the entire city with an iron fist. He uses old Mardi Gras masks to hide his face. The villain has a bunch of lieutenants that manage different parts of the city for him, and the Heckler keeps defeating them and throwing them in jail. So naturally, Boss Glitter wants the Heckler to heckle no more. When his lieutenants fail to end his comedy act, Glitter sends a bouquet of flowers with a bomb in them. The Heckler does still survive though, and we don't hear from Boss Glitter anymore. Not because something happened to him, but because something happened to the Heckler comics. They had bad sales, so it was cancelled after 6 issues. Boss Glitter does now live in my head rent-free though. His real name is Alessandro Hummer. I don't know why he chose Boss Glitter, never explained, maybe because glitter gets everywhere, I guess we'll never know. I do not personally know which Marvel writer sat down and decided to create a villain whose only power was juggling, but oh wow do I thank them for their service. Thank you Mark, thank you Elliot. Oddball is the character and he is, as stated, a juggler. That's it, that's his power. This guy doesn't have any special abilities other than really good hand-eye coordination. Oddball juggles dangerous things, so he is threatening. He juggles balls similar to like smoke grenades, and there are some with corrosive liquid inside. There are spiky edge balls. It's all very creative. There are more, but basically if you think the weapon can be made or put in a ball, he can juggle it. He was part of some bad guy teams like Death Throws. That was a team specifically made of evil jugglers. I am not lying, I promise you. And he also joined the Masters of Evil. I can't believe that there is a villain that all they have going for them is juggling. Do Mark and Elliot hate the circus? I don't know. In all fairness, the method of taking something random and creating a character has been around a long time and used not only by Marvel but also DC, like Kite-Man. Who hates kites that much? Turns out this one does have some history behind it. The real name for Kite-Man is Charles Brown. There was a comic strip character that often gets his kite stuck in trees and his name was Charlie Brown, so Charles may have been based off Charlie. Kite-Man wasn't super popular when he first got on people's radar, but he started feeling the wind at his back when he was in Harley Quinn the animated series. The guy had a pretty big role in that series and now is getting his own show. According to the reliable source that is the internet, it looks like it's set to be released this year, so we will check back in a few months. Glad the character found his place, his niche if you will, but he is just so niche. What do you mean this grown man is just flying around with a giant kite strapped to his back? Actually, that's just the Wright brothers. Those American original aviators have quite a bit in common with Kite-Man. Unique to Kite-Man, of course, there are weapon kites like a trap net kite and a really big kite. People in the Marvel Universe have been trying to recreate the super soldier serum since it created Captain America. Not every trial goes well, and some go unbelievably poorly. Horace Littleton attempted to recreate the serum, but he wanted to add a little something. That something was, and since I'm not sure if we can say it here, take the first letters of long, slow, down. Okay, first letters of long, slow, down. Got it? I hope so. Shockingly, this version of the super serum did not pick up steam and the guy lost his funding. This meant he was forced to test the serum on himself. He turned into Dr. Mindbubble, a truly mind-boggling terrifying villain. He blows bubbles, evil bubbles, that trap his enemies' minds. They create a virtual reality for the person in the bubble, and it's very, very real. The person truly believes they exist there and have no idea they are in a bubble. It's also outrageous. The only way to escape the bubble is if you decided to put an end to your existence in the bubble realm, then you can wake back up in actual reality. Dr. Mindbubble was defeated by Captain America when Cap bent the Mindbubble tube in his head with his shield. That meant all the bubbles were forced to stay in Mindbubble's head, and that made the guy go crazier than he already was. He then launched his own mind, body, and soul out of a window. DC creates some truly unhinged villain designs. This time, it's an unborn baby that has super intelligence that lives its life suspended in the top portion of an advanced robotic suit. Catch all that? Orphan is the baby's villain name. Technically it's Orphan 3 or Orphan the 3rd maybe. Orphan was going to be just regular baby, like born instead of permanently suspended in a villain suit, but his parents were scientists in the DC universe and that never goes well for anyone. The scientists were studying this thing called the Source Wall. The wall was breached and his parents were eliminated. Luckily for Orphan, they had a techno-familiar named Darling that saved Orphan's life, and receiving all the energy caused him to have above average intellect for an unborn baby. Thank goodness, we barely want Orphan running around as is. Imagine if he actually had the intelligence of a baby the entire time. Paste Pot Pete was so goofy, the character reinvented himself. He came to the decision with the help of Spider-Man when Spidey laughed at him. Was it a nice thing for Spider-Man to do? Maybe not, but when you decide to become a villain, sorry, but I think people don't need to be as nice to you. He turned to crime because he thought it would make him more money, which at least turned to crime for the right reason, you know? Because you want to be a menace to society. Anyway, the guy was already making a lot of money. He created, like, the Gorilla Glue of the Marvel Universe, very sticky. His glue is what he uses to create crime, and he literally carries it around in a bucket with his glue gun in hand, connected to the bucket using a tube. It's all very technical, but I don't know, there has to be a better way. You know, dude, you're rich, get a backpack. The glue is a force to be reckoned with, backpack or not. The paste dries instantly and can stick to almost anywhere. The only thing that can affect the glue is ultraviolet light. Eventually, Pete upgraded to a system that didn't involve him carrying a bucket around, but as said at the beginning of this point, the villain reinvented himself with the unwanted help of Spider-Man. Spider-Man is known for his little quips and roasts. When Spidey met Paste Pot Pete, he laughed a little too hard, and the villain had had enough and decided to become Trapster. He thought it sounded more menacing. I don't know if I necessarily agree, it kinda sounds like a board game to me, but y'all let me know what you think in the comments. Let's revisit a favorite villain of mine, Calendar Man. Every iteration of this character is fabulous, you can't deny that, I will not let you. His first, middle, and last names are all calendar adjacent. His name is Julian Gregory Day. Julian themes his crimes and his criminal outfits to different holidays. So for example, this past weekend we probably would have had an evil Easter bunny roaming the streets hiding little evil eggs. The first version of Calendar Man was probably meant to be a ridiculous sort of joke villain, but DC is in the rewriting era and gave this guy a bit more depth and also totally changed his look. I prefer the old one that was looking camp right in the eye, but I guess the man with the calendar tattooed around his head is also fine. Calendar Man does not have any superpowers, I guess, but he is very good at inventing. He always has a new gadget to perfectly match the holiday or event he is emulating. He also, before they backstoried him, he always had new outfits. This man's closet must be a department store, honestly. Probably the most outrageous version of the character, if everything previously stated wasn't enough, was a version of him from the Tom King run of Batman. That guy was a metahuman. A metahuman that would be reborn once a year when he shed his skin, so he was almost like a lizard. DC has had some controversial characters over the years. This villain is yet another fun little example. I was so excited when I found him because he's from Colombia and I'm from Colombia, and I was like, that's so cool. I really hope he's a well-rounded and interesting villain with no racially insensitive characteristics at all. His name is Snowflame, and he is a cartel leader that creates the white powder that shares a name with Coca-Cola. Yeah. In order to have powers, Snowflame must use the other method of ingesting the substance, the nose. Once that happens, he is super strong, speedy, can't feel pain, and if you touch him, he is coated in the snow, so you will also be affected by the substance. He also has fire powers because you'll need that when it comes to the snow. know. The character is not widely loved for obvious reasons, but there is one person out there that is single-handedly keeping this character afloat. There is a fan-made webcomic out there that gives the character backstory and even puts him up against various DC heroes. This person just really loves Snowflame. The character has made a few reappearances and died 3 times. The first time was his first appearance against the New Guardians. He was in a shed that blew up. The second was a rebooted version of the character that met his end to a giant jaguar. And the third and current final time, instead of snorting his usual power-inducing stuff, he snorted a poison frog. Everything I just said only makes sense here. I literally can't say this anywhere else. I'll sound bonkers. Anyways, Snowflame, ew, hate him. Dr. Forklift has only been seen once, and that was enough. I am flabbergasted with this one, for real. So he was originally a regular guy, and his job was performer. He was the Great Golly Gosh Show and his trained hamsters. They were a traveling act. They were performing at a chemical plant, and one of the hamsters got stage fright and somehow was strong enough to knock over a big spotlight that fell and hit Dr. Forklift, and a bunch of chemicals got spilled in the process, and there was a forklift nearby. A big explosion happened, and when the guy woke up, his bottom half was gone and replaced with the forklift. This sounds like I'm making it up, but I swear this is real. Dr. Forklift also became a genius because he happened to also be beside scientific papers when the chemical explosion thing happened. In the single issue he was in, the doctor was swapping humans' minds with hamsters so he could have an army and only hamsters would listen to him. Plus, the doctor needs endless electricity to survive, so he keeps the hamsters running on a wheel that generates electricity. Plastic Man ends up thwarting the villain after a battle between all the humans in hamsters' bodies and all the hamsters in humans' bodies, and Plastic Man and Dr. Forklift. Dr. Forklift gets arrested, all the hamsters and humans are given their rightful brains back, so a happy ending overall. But reading this comic was a fever dream. It's Plastic Man Volume 2, Issue 11, if you want a good laugh. DC has done it again, creating a truly unhinged character design in the form of Orphan 3, or Orphan the Third. Orphan is an orphan. Orphan is also a baby that lives suspended in an advanced robotic suit and thinks like an adult. Orphan's parents were studying the Source Wall. The Source Wall is the barrier that surrounds the multiverse. One day that barrier was breached, obliterating Orphan's parents. Orphan's mom was pregnant with him at the time, and he survived because of his family's techno-familiar, Darling. Darling assimilated Orphan's mom's body and created an artificial womb. Since Orphan and Darling were so close to the wall being breached, Orphan absorbed the power from what was on the other side of the wall, energy from the source. The source is the source of everything. Its power is limitless, and Orphan has that running through his veins. It gives him powers like teleportation and energy blasts. Darling and Orphan are tied to each other in some ways. When Darling was destroyed, Orphan went into a sort of like catatonic state. Deadringer can take on the form of any dead body he touches and can cause way more problems than you might think. Louis Dexter is a mutant. His mimicking abilities are not reserved for people, he can also mimic animals. He discovered his abilities by touching his deceased cat and father, and that is so traumatic. Dexter chose to use his powers for evil. He started to remove pieces of heroes from their graves because when he touches a deceased super person, he gets their powers. Dexter is limited to one person at a time, and if he wants to revisit the body of someone, he has to touch them again, and that is hard when you take decaying into account. Seems like it could be a major inconvenience, so he decided to make his life easier. He was going to start carrying pieces of heroes in a cigar box with him. The pieces, gross. Deadringer's most famous battle was when he and his partner Super Patriot became Porcupine and Captain America to destroy Captain America's reputation. The two staged a fight at a charity gala and deliberately hurt the crowd. The pair were eventually arrested. Death Adder is one of the many villains Deathringer has impersonated, so spoiler, he was deceased at one point but was revived and then died again. Death Adder was Roland Burroughs. Roland received a surgery courtesy of Roxxon Oil Company. The surgery was supposed to give him claws, a bionic tail, and gills. The part of the surgery to give him the gills went wrong, and Roland lost the ability to speak, becoming mute. Roland, now a villain, received his costume and joined the Serpent Squad. Death Adder and the Serpents became mercs for hire. He was a pretty serious foe as his tail could move up to 60 miles per hour and was adorned with a bunch of sharp poisonous prongs. So if the sheer force of getting smacked doesn't take you out, the poison sure will. His claws also had the poison in them, and Death Adder has had about 30 appearances total. Powerful sorcerer Duran once tried unleashing monsters in Mexico City, causing immense amounts of damage. Duran lives in Mexico and he hated seeing the nature there getting destroyed. He was angry with developers and the large amounts of pollution caused by the tourism industry and just the way people treat his home. He became radicalized, and that is not something you want from a powerful sorcerer. Duran kidnapped a girl and used her as a vessel for the true power of the earth, as Duran puts it, so she caused a massive explosion downtown, and it got some local Mexican heroes involved and Superman. This all happened in Superman Annual Volume 2 Issue 12. It's also the only appearance Duran has had. The big final battle happens in downtown Mexico City, and it's a disaster. There is a huge firestorm unleashed, and it takes the powers of Superman and the 3 local heroes to get everything under control. It wasn't easy. Duran learned sorcery from Firewolf, and Firewolf was able to control Superman's mind, so now Duran is capable of that and also crushing the windpipes of Superman with only his mind, among other things, like being able to call upon the primal powers of Mother Earth. The American dragon Unah Hilla was based on a real legend in Sioux mythology, and she's also a complete menace. She is a demon residing in the ground, and it destroys everything around her, especially the surface and anyone on it. She has bad vibes to the point where she can pollute the soil she just passes through, making it unusable. Unah Hilla is somewhere between 30 to 50 feet long. She terrorizes the local indigenous communities, kidnapping people, swallowing people whole, destroying the food supply. Literally not the kind of pest you want in your garden. She can also create monster children that are like mini hers. She needed to be exterminated, and Wolverine was around and ready to help, so he went to take her down. Only she was a tough fight. It wasn't until her heart was separated from her body that she finally went down. Sticks and Stone have very different origin stories, but they cause trouble together like they are brothers. Sticks was originally homeless, and Stone was on a team of scientists doing experimental cancer research. The team of scientists were offering compensation for anyone willing to be experimented on, so Sticks signed up. Stone had an interesting theory that he was unauthorized to test. Stone thought that someone could become immune to cancer the same way someone can become immune to snake bites. Of course, he did run the test on Sticks, and of course it ended in the worst way. Sticks became a walking cancer, decaying any organic material he comes in contact with. Awful outcome, but at least Stone's theory was right. Sticks was immune to cancer himself. Stone felt really bad about this and vowed to find a cure for Sticks. Somewhere along the way, we actually don't know how it happened, but Stone turned into a big stone monster, and with that he gained the ability to decay any inorganic matter. So Sticks and Stone together are a team you do not want to go up against, no matter who or what you are. Blood Shadow is a very cool villain that I would never want to meet, but I think they should bring back anyway. He was known for facing off against Wolverine and perishing at the claws of Wolverine. Blood Shadow was capable of telepathy. He was also intimately familiar with the human body and its deadly pressure points like the back of his hand. Blood Shadow was also a trained martial artist. He combined this trio of skills into an interesting fighting style. He would use telepathy to determine an opponent's next move, his martial arts training to counter it, and his knowledge of the human body to determine which deadly pressure points would be exposed and which ones he could hit in the moment. Unfortunately for Blood Shadow, his telepathy was a bit too powerful in a fight with Wolverine, and he accidentally unlocked Wolverine's base feral animalistic instincts. No one can survive those, not even Blood Shadow. Headhunter started out as nothing more than a con woman, but using her powers of persuasion, she became the most powerful woman on Wall Street. She is deranged, and I mean that with everything in me. Headhunter is obsessed with Namor, so obsessed she kidnaps him and puts him in her wall of heads. You know what hunters do with animal heads they take as trophies? She did that with the people that crossed her on her journey to the top of Wall Street. She also has the ability to mesmerize people and control them, so that also has helped her in her journey to the top of the financial world. The wall was eventually destroyed, and it turns out all the people were actually just catatonic, put to sleep by Headhunter's mesmerizing powers. Headhunter also has little knife fingers, and she wears a lot of suits. The powerful villainess known as Verna once tried to destroy all spider people. Y'all, I've been waiting for the chance to talk about Verna. Verna is from Earth 001. She comes from a family that has dedicated their lives to traveling across the multiverse, hunting down and exterminating all spider totems. The family goes by the Inheritors. Like a leech, they parasite powers from other people, feeding on their life forces. The Inheritors eventually locked in on the spider totems because they wanted to defeat the spider deity of Earth 001, so that means it has to be every other world's battle too. They went up against an army of spider people. The odds were never in their favor. Verna and her family were left on a super radioactive Earth, Earth 31 145 and were trapped there forever as they are sensitive to radiation and have to stay put in a tower. Verna ultimately passed after escaping said tower while trying to get her father's soul that was trapped in a crystal. Verna's main power is the life force energy absorption thing. Once Verna touches a person, even if she doesn't drain your life force all the way and you live, she can still sense you from almost anywhere, which is super creepy. Verna is also technically immortal. She doesn't age, she doesn't get sick, but she can be exterminated. If someone were to split her in two, she's done for. So overall, a pretty sick woman in all senses of the word, but the reason I have been waiting to mention her, one of my favorite movies when I was a little girl was Barbie Fairytopia. The main villain in that movie was La Verna, and she looks exactly the same as Marvel's Verna. Look at the hair and look at the names, they are the same. I am not saying they copied Barbie, but there are clues. Deathstalker was once a wealthy man from a prestigious family, then he decided to become a criminal. He invented something called the T-Ray or Time Displacer Ray. When used, it transports its victims to an interdimensional void for a few hours. When used, the ray looked really scary because it would make people dissolve before your eyes. It wasn't until hours later that you would find out the person was actually fine. In a fight with Daredevil, his gun exploded and it sent him to the limbo-like realm permanently. He eventually figured out how to get back to Earth, but the catch was he could only be here for up to like 5 hours before he was pulled back to limbo. During the 5 hours, he appeared like he was a phantom, and he really used that to his advantage, stealing tech and creating cybernetic death grip devices to put in his gloves. Including his Dead Ringer appearance, Deathstalker has appeared about 24 times.
Dr. Doom is always a villain that many people already put on a pedestal. So of course, it makes sense that he would eventually get powers to match his status. This all went down during the 2015 Secret Wars event when Dr. Doom was elevated to the status of not just Emperor, but God, becoming God Emperor Doom, after being the only person willing to challenge the Beyonders during the final moments of the incursion. When everything came crashing down, Doom took the power for himself and built a patchwork-like world out of all the alternate universes that had collided with one another. It was later revealed that to have absolute power and shape reality, he'd actually been using the powers of Molecule Man, who was kept hidden away. Eventually, in a battle against his rival Reed Richards, Doom lost these powers after admitting that Reed probably would have been able to do a better job at recreating the multiverse following the incursions, thereby causing Molecule Man to instead choose to bestow his power to Mr. Fantastic. Nanaue wasn't always known for being a demigod and prince. In the previous New Earth continuity, he is hinted at being the son of the king of all sharks, also known as the Shark God, although this was all kind of seen as a rumor in regards to his origin. Initially, it wasn't very concrete. He wouldn't become a god over time necessarily, but instead would have this origin more firmly established as being his true origin as time went on in the comics. In the Prime Earth continuity and the Harley Quinn animated series today, this is firmly cemented as King Shark's origins, making him a demigod. In fact, even in the newest Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League game, he's also a god. Like his father, Thane also has experience with wielding an insane amount of power. Initially though, Thane strove to simply be a healer in his everyday. He was eventually hunted down by Thanos, who was searching for his secret hidden son. Thane, being an Inhuman, didn't have powers yet when Ebony Maw first found him, but as a hybrid Inhuman and Eternal child, his powers were triggered and brought to the surface after undergoing Terrigenesis. This drastically changed his appearance and gave him an insta-kill power, where everyone within a certain, rather large radius of him would be killed simply by being near him, which is a pretty traumatizing thing to happen when you're like, I want to save people. Oh my gosh, my powers kill everyone. He could also encase people in amber. In fact, if you've heard of the story where Kitty Pryde helped Star-Lord save Spartax from the Brood after the entire planet was encased in amber, the person who had done the encasing, yeah, that was Thane. Thane would not only have insane power just from these abilities, but also would for a time have, get this, the Phoenix Force. Don't worry though, Thane would later lose the Phoenix Force after becoming trapped in the God Quarry, where he remains, or at least where he remains at the time of this recording, until I guess we remember him and pull him out of the God Quarry. There is a lot that Zod has done to sell himself as a god tier character. I feel like every time we see him, he is doing something even more extra than the last time. During the Prime Earth continuity, there is a point where Amanda Waller is lucky or unlucky enough perhaps to capture Zod to use him on her Task Force X, aka the Suicide Squad. However, even after having an explosive kryptonite device placed within his brain, Zod escapes Waller. Yeah. Does his own brain surgery, basically. Tormented by the pain of his family who are currently trapped inside the Phantom Zone, he manages to remove the bomb from his head by himself using his heat vision to break free and go rescue his family. After doing so, he also seeks out a planet for them to settle on to turn into a sort of new Krypton. The indigenous people of this planet are actually willing to work for Zod as they believe him and his family to be gods. Madelyne Prior was kind of born a god when you think about it. She is a clone of Jean Grey whose life was sparked by a piece of the Phoenix Force. The Phoenix Force itself is like a cosmic god of sorts. It's not like, I don't know if we call it a god like officially, but it's godlike in power. And because a piece of that is built into Maddie, in a way, Maddie is also like a god. If you're wondering how or why I'm including her here when she, as I've said, has always been a god, since this is the exact reason I'm not including villains like Loki on this list, so for all of you who are wondering why Loki isn't here, that's why I didn't include him, it has to do with the fact that she wasn't always aware of her true origin. During the time she wasn't aware, Maddie simply acted like a normal human woman. However, after suffering a mental break, Maddie was transformed into a However, after suffering a mental break when she realized the truth of her origin, Maddie was transformed into a supremely powerful being, allowing her to tap into her true, unlimited potential. Poison Ivy is a character who honestly should always be at a god tier, just based on her power set honestly, but there's only really ever been one point that I can think of where she decided to take things to that kind of level. For the most part, Ivy stays pretty confined to Gotham, giving Batman and the city trouble with her eco-terror, but not really extending much beyond Gotham's reach. Now and then, I've seen her also go to some other cities, I've seen her go on a crime spree with Harley and Metropolis as well, but really she stays pretty confined to a single city with her mischief. However, in the Tom King story, Everyone Loves Ivy, trauma caused Ivy to strike out and go bigger, much bigger, taking over the whole world through vegetables. Yeah, she mind-controlled people through the veggies that they ate, and she used her control over everyone to basically make the world a better place and bring about kind of world peace, but of course at the expense of free will. A big no-no in the hero books. Ivy, however, was convinced to relinquish control by Harley Quinn, who Batman and Catwoman basically recruited to help them deal with this situation, and ended up giving up her influence and her power at the end of the story as a result. Owen Reese was just a normal man before he received powers that made him a god, or at least put him on that level. He was a lab technician when one day, fixing an atomic device, he just poked a hole through the universe and into the multiverse, accidentally reaching across space and time into the universe of the Beyonders, and tapping into a massive amount of power there. This power would put him on an omnipotent and omniscient level, allowing him to rearrange the molecules of matter and even energy. He could even do that with organics, although for a long time there was a psionic barrier in place so that he wouldn't do that, because it's pretty messed up, even for a villain. Molecule Man can also warp reality on a massive galactic scale. It's really weird to think of this next villain as a god, but even he has earned that status before in the comics. I know, it's crazy. And strangely, it's actually happened more than once, sort of. The other version of the character who was imbued with god powers was from an alternate reality, admittedly, but even in the main continuity, Joker has gone god tier. In this case, it all went down when he managed to trick Superman fan and often mischievous antagonist, Mr. Mxyzptlk. Mr. Mxyz only intended to give Joker 0.01% of his power, but instead, he accidentally gave him 99.99%. Yeah, yikes. Needless to say, Joker most definitely did not use this power to do anything good. Eating China as though it were takeout, yeah, super weird and super scary, and tormenting Batman daily and killing him only to res him the next day so that he could do that all over again. It should surprise no one that of course there was a time when Thanos became an almost literal god. When and where was this? In an alternate future that ended up being erased, but where CGR, aka Cosmic Ghost Rider, still hails from. even though it doesn't exist. This was a future where Thanos had committed to winning over Death's heart by destroying not just half of all life in the galaxy, but all life in the galaxy. He had eradicated life down to the point that only a few people remained, and eventually only he did. This King Thanos, who was a ruler of the universe, brought in his past self to eliminate him. However, this reality was erased when the younger Thanos refused to do his older self's bidding, and despite all his power, still saw King Thanos as being weak. Rude. Cersei went from being a very powerful witch to being a literal goddess. How did this happen? Well, in Justice League Dark, we learned of the Witch-Marked, powerful women who had pieces of Hecate's power hidden away within themselves. Diana Prince, aka Wonder Woman, is revealed to be one of these individuals as we discover, who they all are, or so we think, as it's later revealed that Cersei was also secretly one of Hecate's chosen Witch-Marked. She uses her attachment to Hecate to devise a plot to steal all the power from the other Witch-Marked and Hecate herself. Cersei actually succeeds in this, surprisingly, and so gains a godly amount of power, putting her on the level of the goddess of magic, Hecate herself. In fact, because there is no Hecate after that, she basically is the new Hecate. Pretty crazy.